What's up, AP students? Hey, this is Mr. Kavanaugh. Due to the weather, we're going to do a little lesson here, and feel free to take notes on this. You can stop it and start it whenever you need to. I'm also going to add an assignment here at the end just so we can keep moving in the right direction. We're losing too many days here. So, all right, I'm going to start kind of where we left off last time we were in class. I know block one, you guys we got through this, and block three, we were just getting through it. So we didn't get through all of this. So if you have these notes, why don't you pull these out and look at them. This is from the last time on the Articles of Confederation. All right, so we talked about the Articles of Confederation being the first form of government, and the fact that there were a lot of issues and problems with it. There were some positive things that happened, like the Treaty of Paris and the Land Ordinance, Northwest Ordinance. But these things right here kind of outline the failures of the Articles of Confederation. And these things will be good to know, because later when we talk about the Constitution, you're going to see how we changed a lot of these. If you look at most of these, the reasons why we had failures in the Articles of Confederation is because we tried to go completely away from a monarchy. And so we kind of overcorrected, so to speak, and put in things like all states need to approve an amendment, or no national courts, or no power to tax, no power to enforce treaties, and those kind of things, and having a weak president. So all of those things ended up being real failures for the Articles of Confederation. This led to an event in 1786 called Shays' Rebellion. We're going to show this little video here. See if I can get this to work.
The Revolutionary War left American states in debt. To raise money, legislators raised taxes. This angered poor farmers and war veterans to the point where they formed a rebellion and almost caused a civil war in Massachusetts. Daniel Shays, a former captain in the Continental Army, led the protest, which came to be known as Shays' Rebellion. In the summer of 1786, several thousand of Shays' followers prevented tax collection and used force to keep debtors out of prison. They headed to Springfield to seize weapons, intending to force the Boston legislature to change the law. Massachusetts residents were terrified. The legislature realized it was powerless. The Continental Army had been disbanded after the Revolutionary War, and the federal government had no money for new troops. Finally, wealthy merchants in Boston agreed to raise an army of over 4,000 militia to fight Shays' men.
These men were talking about forming a new country out there. There's no telling what might have happened. If Shays' Rebellion had flourished, if these guys had been able to grab all those guns and that arsenal and armed a big army, it would have been a very bad thing for the country. The people in Boston sort of put together a 4,000-man army and marched across western Massachusetts and basically blew Daniel Shays and his friends away. They all ran for their lives when they saw these guys coming at them.
Shays and his troops were eventually pardoned, and Massachusetts began to offer tax and debt relief. Locally, this clash was anticlimactic, but Shays' Rebellion had momentous consequences for the nation. It highlighted a weakness in the Articles of Confederation, which didn't give Congress the right to establish or fund an army.
The impact of Shays' Rebellion was convincing people that we had to have a really strong federal government. Washington, and now I say to Hamilton, and a lot of other people said, this proves that we've got to have a new constitution.
All right, so as the video says, this rebellion that took place in the mid 1780s caused the country, the new country, to kind of look at themselves and say, all right, do we really have enough power in the federal government to prevent this kind of thing? It's really ironic. I mean, Shays' Rebellion is kind of what the colonists did against the British, similar type thing, where they were protesting against the courts and the taxes and things like that. And but now, since we had our own government, these Articles of Confederation, we felt like, well, we can't have this type of rebellion. And really this, like the video said, it pushed us to believe that we need a new type of government and more powerful federal government. All right, so all of this is going to lead to the U.S. Constitution and the creation of the U.S. Constitution in the Continental Congress. And so around the late 1780s, 1788, the many of the founding fathers that had lived through the revolution, that helped fight the revolution, as you can see in this painting right here, got together in Philadelphia to write the Constitution. And if we were in class, I would kind of ask you, what you noticed from this painting. And you could, first of all, you notice that this is all white people, probably all wealthy, all landowners. You can see Benjamin Franklin here in the middle, George Washington standing up here, kind of on the podium here, and then many other famous Americans that we've come to know over the years as our founding fathers. So when they got together in Philadelphia, 55 delegates, representatives from every state, they decided we need to recreate these articles and turn them into some other form of government. And this is where the Constitution would come out. No women, no Native Americans, no African Americans, no poor people at this. I mean, that kind of describes the time period, obviously. It was in the summer of 1788, very hot in Philadelphia. They had closed all of the windows and doors because they were worried about any information or secrets getting out, and extremely hot. And they were also worried about the British hanging around and seeing kind of what was going on in America, and maybe pouncing on any problems or issues that would come about. All right. So in the new Constitution, just talked about some of these things, some of the people that were there. Benjamin Franklin, who was 81 at the time, which obviously was very old for that time period. Washington, Hamilton, Jefferson. Actually Jefferson was gone during this, but some of these other guys that were there. We borrowed a lot of these ideas, ironically, for the U.S. Constitution from the English. The Magna Carta many years ago was a written form of government that we kind of scripted it from. The English Bill of Rights from 1689, and then of course Parliament would be our model for our Congress, and then we would switch over to a bicameral legislature. Okay, so some of the key things here that I want you to know, again, you probably should be writing some of this down. You can pause it as we go through. And just email me if you have any questions. I'll probably just do a brief review when we get back, but I wanted to make sure we talked about this. So in the new Constitution, there was going to be a bicameral legislature now, so two houses. Basically, this came about because of something called the Great Compromise. It was a compromise between the large states and the small states. And so essentially what they said is our House of Representatives are going to be based on population. So the bigger the state, the more representatives. And then the Senate was going to have, everybody's going to have the equal number of senators, which would be two. So what you're doing there is you're compromising between, say, like New Jersey at the time and Pennsylvania or Virginia. There was the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan, and then they compromised between the two by doing this, having a bicameral legislature, satisfying both sides. We talked about slavery being crossed out of the Declaration of Independence. Well, slavery was only seen twice in the U.S. Constitution. Neither one of those is banning slavery. It was not addressed at this time. The first mention of it is that they said that every slave was going to be counted as 3/5 of a person in the counting of population. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, they viewed them less than human at that time, obviously. And they wanted to make sure that the certain southern states didn't have more representatives based on the slaves that were there. So they said, well, we're going to count them as 3/5 in that population. And then the other thing in the Constitution was that they said they were going to ban slave trade, the international slave trade, 20 years from the time that the Constitution was ratified. So it was ratified around 1788. So in 1808, the international slave trade would be banned. And they would follow that rule, even though after 1808, there were slaves that were smuggled in illegally. The other kind of important and controversial part of the Constitution was the Electoral College. Um, and the Electoral College, I'm going to briefly talk about that. I think most of you know what that is, but the Electoral College is a system we still have today that elects the president of the United States through electors. And so I'll just give you an example. In the first presidential election in 1789, when Washington was elected, as you can see here, here are the votes that were handed down on the Electoral College. And then the winner here with 69 electoral votes was Washington. Now, at this time, before the 12th Amendment, this is kind of crazy, each elector cast votes for two different candidates. So let's say the state of Pennsylvania has 20 electors. Well, they get two votes. They can vote for one candidate and they can vote for another candidate. The candidate with the highest number of votes becomes the president, while the candidate with the second highest total becomes vice president. This is how they did it before the 12th Amendment. So our first couple elections. So as you can see here with the electoral count, Washington was first, John Adams was second. So John Adams became the vice president. So at this time, they were not anticipating any political parties or any differences like that. So, I mean, you can imagine in this last election, Biden winning and then Trump becoming the vice president because he got the second amount of votes, or in the last election, Hillary Clinton being the vice president for Trump. It just would not work in today's system because of our differences and differences in political parties. So that rule would be changed with the 12th Amendment fairly early on in our history. So if you look at a map today, this is the Electoral College today. Basically how it works is based on your population, you get a certain amount of electors. So Iowa has 6, California has 55, Texas 38, and so on and so forth. And there will be 6 Democratic electors and 6 Republican electors. And whoever wins your state with the popular vote, those electors will then go to Washington, D.C. in December and cast their vote for the president. Now, they are not bound by law or obligated to necessarily vote for that particular candidate, Democrat or Republican, but 99% of the time they do. So if Iowa were to win, if let's say Trump wins Iowa, then those 6 voters that go will be the Republican voters, and they will go and vote. So if you look at this map, you think you're going to want to win, obviously, the bigger states and send those electors to vote for you. And the total number is 270. Now, there's a couple of reasons why they did this. Number one, they didn't trust the people to make decisions. So they wanted something that would be a step in between that. And then they by doing this, trying to kind of equal out the states as far as their representation. Now, you'd say, well, California and Iowa are not equal. Well, there's a huge population difference, and actually 55-6 is a lot closer than the actual population of California and Iowa. So it does bring us a little bit closer proportionally to them. But so we still have the Electoral College system. Many people have talked about getting rid of it. It could happen, but as of right now, it's still in the books. All right, a big part of this Constitution that you guys need to know is the kind of the writing and the approving of the Constitution. The Constitution put in effect a federalist government. So with the Articles of Confederation, you had a confederation, or power to the states. Federalists is really dividing powers between the state and the federal government, with the federal government having a little bit more authority than the states. Those people that were in favor of the Constitution and approving it were called the Federalists. The people that were against the Constitution were called Anti-Federalists. Eventually, the Constitution was ratified and was approved because a compromise was made, and the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were put in to the Constitution, and kind of giving the anti-federalists what they wanted. The anti-federalists were very afraid that the federal government would just come in and control people, and then the Bill of Rights put them at ease a little bit. All right. So you can see here on this map, it's kind of an important map here showing you who voted for what. The brown section is the people that voted for a federalist government, which again means a balance between the two, but the federal government has more authority. And then the the light brown would be the anti-federalist people. And as you can tell, maybe, is that the Federalist people were mostly in the urban areas for the most part, and the anti-Federalists are mostly in the rural areas. And that's because a lot of times farmers viewed a strong federal government as a bad thing, like Shays' Rebellion, if you think about that. And in the urban areas, the city areas, they kind of depended on the federal government to help them out, to protect them, to provide trade, and those kind of things. So it was really split urban and rural at the time, and was a clear division, and really ended up being our first two political parties, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and kind of a movement towards that Constitution. If you look at this, this is a little government lesson here, kind of. This is a unitary system here at the top, where you have a central government, gives the power to the states, which gives the powers to the citizens. That's kind of like a monarchy type of thing. And then the federalist system is kind of what we ended up with. You have a central government and you have a state government. They both give powers to the citizens, as you can see here. Or a confederacy. This is what we had under the Articles of Confederation, where the states have sovereignty or power. There is a central government, but it really doesn't have much authority over the states. So we went from a monarchy, and we went all the way down to a confederation, and then we kind of settled on this federalist system with our US Constitution. Okay. All right. Most importantly, right here, this is what you really need to know. The strengths of the new government that would be passed would be these things right here. The president is given the power to enforce the laws, the national courts power to interpret the laws, and of course, Congress has the power to create the laws. So there's the three branches of government, and then they're supposed to be balanced, and they're supposed to check each other. Laws are made easier to pass. Instead of having every state approve, you could have a majority vote to get that through. So that made it more a functional government. Congress was given the power to tax. So now the federal government can tax to raise money for the military and other things. And this became important, and a big step really for the colonists to be able to trust the federal government to do this. Congress could regulate interstate and foreign trade, and Congress gave the power to coin money and raise and support armies. So all of these things, if you go back and you look at the Articles of Confederation failures, it was all addressed in the US Constitution. And if we had a lot of time, and if it was this government class, we would look at the US Constitution, and each one of these sections talks about these types of things. There's an article for each branch of the government and what they do. All right, this last one here, very important. That's why I put it on there. The Elastic Clause. If you look at all of the powers given to Congress, they list them out. I think they want to say there's like 18 of them. And the last power given to Congress basically says anything that we missed or anything that we think is necessary and proper, Congress can do. And it's very wide open. It's very broad, and it gives the Congress a little bit more authority than people may want. And that is known as the Elastic Clause. Okay. So Congress can basically do whatever it wants when they feel it's necessary and proper. So the best example of that is starting a national bank. Congress started a national bank, even though it's not in the Constitution. Congress felt it was important enough to do that, and so they did it, and they used the Elastic Clause to get that power done. All right. So again, quick review: the Articles of Confederation, the first form of government, kind of failed. So they met again, and they rewrote our government and made the U.S. Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, which we will talk about Monday first thing, and then get into a little bit the first years of Washington's presidency. All right, your new homework, okay? Homework for Monday is to read 159 through 166, and then I need you to do a reading log. But when you're doing the reading log, maybe divide it up into two categories. The positives of Washington. This is going to talk about President Washington's 8 years as president. List his positives, okay? List it, and then give me a description like you would a reading log, and list the negatives. I would maybe shoot for maybe like 4 each. So then you have like 8 terms total, if you can, or 5 and 3, whatever you think applies to the positives and negatives to Washington's presidency. All right. If you have any questions, please email me. Again, I know this isn't the ideal way of doing this, but we wanted to make sure we got one lesson in and continue to move forward. We will probably have class Monday and Tuesday, Washington, and talk about Adams, and then we will take our next test on Wednesday of next week during the early out, which will be fine. You'll have enough time to do that. All right, so if we have no questions, I just want to make sure that everybody has a great day and stay safe, and we'll see you on Monday.